Welcome to Indiana Football Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Indiana Football Weekly is brought to you by BetNow.eu. Make sure you go to BetNow.eu, use the promo code Truth100 to get a cashback bonus on your first deposit. I am your co-host for the Indiana Football Weekly show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Cole Hanna. How you doing, Cole?
Doing pretty good, Mike, coming off a big IU football win. And, it's tough to complain after they get a much-needed victory.
Yeah, 5-2 now, one win from bowl eligibility, a few wins away from a little bit more than that, and a 34-28 win. Michael Penix started the game 9 for 14 for 141 yards, one touchdown and an interception. Peyton Ramsey came off the bench 20 for 27, 193, one touchdown, and no matter how much we talk about how this team is better, they're more dangerous with Michael Penix, there's not many college football teams in the country that have a better backup than Peyton Ramsey.
No, you've got to love what Ramsey was able to do for you when he got into that football game. I mean, it's not easy to, go through a week expecting to be the backup and get called into that game midway through the second quarter and kind of toss into the fire and say, hey, go out there and don't miss a beat. And they were able to, for the most part, do that. Now, they had some offensive struggles in that second half that were, pretty clear. But for the most part, Ramsey gets in there and leads that huge drive to take the lead going into halftime. And I thought that was really one of the game-changing plays of the game. When you look at that 30, 35-yard touchdown pass he threw to Nick Westbrook, that was kind of a danger zone for Indiana, and he threw a really, really good football. Nick Westbrook made a play on it. But, I mean, like you said, it's just a luxury not many teams have to have such an experienced player sitting behind Michael Penix. And with the injury issues Penix has had, they just seem to keep popping up. To have a guy like that behind him, I mean, that's a perfect situation for Indiana.
Yeah, and you talk about Westbrook, and a lot of this comes, I think, from junior receiver Whoop Philyor, who's caught at least 10 passes coming in this game for 100 yards in the two previous games. And you've got Nick Westbrook with the big play at the end of the half. Sophomore tight end Peyton Hendershot, who led the way with 6 catches. The ball was spread out a little bit more, and I think that can be, directly the result of how good a season Philyor has had so far.
Yeah, no, you could tell, I mean, with how just absolutely dominant he's been the last couple of weeks, like you said, leading the NCAA, I believe, in both catches and yards in that span. Teams are going to start, getting a little bit of help over to his side. I mean, he's been such a dominant player. Teams are going to start looking at double teams and trying to keep the ball away from him. So you saw guys like, I mean, Peyton Hendershot's been, I think, one of the best tight ends in college football for the most part all year long. At least from a receiving standpoint, he's been very, very good for Indiana. Nick Westbrook is, fifth-year senior, guy who's been here for a while. He's had some really good seasons, and I thought he's been relatively quiet this season, more quiet than I expected him to be, but he bounced back in this one with a big game. Ty Freifogel as well with a few catches. Even Stevie Scott, who's usually not a big factor in the receiving game, ended up with, I believe, 5 catches for 36 yards in this one, so he got involved in that as well. Definitely, Indiana, I think, has one of their big strengths is a relatively deep receiving core. It's not just WAP. You got guys like Westbrook. Donovan Hale didn't do a whole lot in this game, but we've seen him dominate at times. He did have a touchdown pass. Ty Freifogel has played pretty well when called upon. And even guys like David Ellis and Miles Marshall are younger players, but I think you can see the talent when those guys step onto the field. So definitely I think receiver is one of Indiana's biggest strengths, and I think we saw the depth kind of flash in this one.
Well, another position where depth and strength have come into account here is the offensive line, and they lost senior offensive lineman Coy Crunk with a season-ending injury. There are a lot of uncertainties and variables that go into an offensive line and how they all kind of gel. And you take out Cronk's absence and a recent injury to senior Hunter Littlejohn, it's taken a toll on this offensive line. And Kreider stepped in for Littlejohn at center against Maryland. And this offensive line, Simon Stepanek, I don't know. They need to just have regular names like Johnson for me. Move to left guard, Mackenzie Moore, whatever the hell that is. These guys have all played really well, and Stevie Scott over 100 yards, and this was not over 100 yards against Eastern Illinois. And Maryland doesn't have a good defense, but they're still better than Eastern Illinois. And if the offensive line can continue to play well together, this team could do a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of shocking. I mean, it's one of the weird things where Corey Cronk coming into the season was looked at as a possible NFL prospect. You know, this was a guy that was expected to dominate, to be the leader of this offensive line, and he goes down. And even when they had him in there, you know, this was not a dominant rushing team. They were really not racking up a whole lot of stuff on the ground. Even against UConn and teams like Eastern Illinois, they were solid on the ground, but they didn't exactly blow you away there. And then now in these last couple of weeks with Corey Cronk down, they've slot in. I think Matthew Bedford deserves a lot of credit for the play he's been as a true freshman. But they've really started to open up that run game. And I don't think they're ever going to be a power running football team as far as their first identity. I think they're always going to want to throw the football, especially with Michael Penix. I think that's going to be their main thing, is they're going to be a passing football team with their stable of wide receivers, their stable of quarterbacks. But what Stevie Scott's been able to do these last couple of weeks has been very, very effective on the ground. That teams can't just key in on the passing game. They're having to respect the rushing attack of Indiana. And it's really kind of shocking how they've opened up the running game these last couple of weeks when it was not a big part of the offense prior to these last couple of weeks. And how that's able to happen when Corey Cronk goes down, I don't know. I think everyone just kind of stepped up in his absence. And I think maybe a little bit attributed that to Corey Cronk. I think he's been a huge leader. If you listen to the coaches talk about him since he's gone down, he's pretty much been another coach. And I think when you lose your leader, maybe everyone kind of has to understand, okay, we all have to step up. He's gone. If we're going to make this work, then all of us, all five of us along the offensive line, we all need to step up, shoulder a little bit more responsibility, and start to turn this thing around. So not only has this offensive line been great all season long with protecting the quarterback, we're starting to see them make some progress in the run game. And when you have a game next week against Nebraska, who's been awful defending the run, there should be some confidence there, I think, amongst the Indiana football team, that not only are we starting to run the ball really well right now, but we've got some matchups coming up in which we can really exploit that weakness.
Yeah, and the other thing was the defense. They gave up 28 points, but the thing that stuck out to me was the last two drives. And on the first play of Maryland's penultimate drive, sophomore defensive back Juwan Burgess, met Maryland's Javon Leake in the backfield, stripped him of the ball, recovered it. Burgess' takeaway led to Logan Justice's field goal that made it score 34-28. And then on the last drive by the Terrapins, Tyrell Pegram, everybody's got a weird name in this game, misfired a pass deep downfield into coverage, and sophomore defensive back Reese Taylor adjusted to the overthrown ball, made the play for the interception. So the defense is not playing great, but when it mattered here, they made the plays, and that's something that we haven't seen in a long time in Indiana. Usually it's the defense's inability to get off the field on third down or to turn the ball over from the other team in the fourth quarter keeps this team coming up short time and time and again. And I think this is something great for the future that we saw.
Yeah, Mike, I can't agree more. It just felt like watching that game, watch Maryland get the ball one last possession, down 7. It just felt like it's Indiana football. They're going to score here. We're going to lose by 1, right? That's typically how these games have gone.
That's Indiana
football. Exactly. It's painful to watch, but the defense made a big play to get the win. Really happy. Guys like Juwan Burgess and Reese Taylor actually graded out pretty much elite in coverage in this game. If you look at Pro Football Focus, I believe those guys played around 36 to 37 snaps, were only targeted once, and obviously that was incomplete pass. So, you can't ask for better coverage from those two guys. They were elite. And specifically defensively, I'm going to give a little bit of credit to the Indiana coaching staff here. It was pretty ugly to watch at times in the first half. Maryland was really having their way with that Indiana defense. Now, once we hit halftime, you could tell they made some adjustments offensively. Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, said Maryland was doing some stuff they really had not done all season long when you look at the first half, and I think that's probably the sign of a desperate team. I mean, Maryland was really kind of trending in the wrong direction coming into this game. They needed to do something new, and it was working in Indiana in the first half. They adjusted to the Maryland offense in that second half, and they give up 7 points the entire second half. And that was on really a blown play. So if you look at take away that one drive, I think the Indiana defense played about as well as you could expect, hope for. I mean, they were pretty much dominant in that second half. And as I mentioned, the Indiana offense was equally struggling. for points. I mean, they only scored 10 points. A field goal, like you said, came off a defensive turnover from Indiana when Juwan Burgess set up the Indiana offense at like the 15 or 16-yard line, and they pretty much did nothing with that but ended up already starting to drive out in field goal range. So the defense really won them this game in the second half. It was, like I said, a complete tale of two halves, but they did, give credit to the coaching staff. They made the necessary adjustments, and that second half, that defense played absolutely outstanding.
All right, now we go to Indiana versus Nebraska. I know you're too young to remember this, but in 1978, Indiana played Nebraska at Indiana, and it was a huge deal. I remember watching the game when I was like 10 years old. That was a long time ago. And Lee Corso coached the Hoosiers, and the Hoosiers got spanked. I think it was like 69-13 by the time it was over. But it was just cool to watch Indiana play Nebraska. I don't know why I bring that up, but it still sticks out to me. This Nebraska team is a lot different than the Tom Osborne team. Scott Frost coaches this team, and a lot of people had high expectations for him coming into the season. They've fallen a little bit short of that, but they have still improved immensely off of last season's start through 7 games. They're 4-3. Indiana's 5-2. Nebraska got whacked by Ohio State. They struggled way too much against an awful Northwestern team, and it seems they didn't even make the trip to Minnesota. But even with those problems, the Huskers still have a shot to make a run at a Big Ten West title. They're not playing like it, but they still have a chance. They get Wisconsin and Iowa at home. Minnesota has a bunch of tough games left to play. I think Nebraska's coming off a bye week, which will give quarterback Adrian Martinez time to get past a major or a minor knee surgery. And the hope there, if you're Nebraska, is it sharpens them up. Now, the one thing with Nebraska's turnovers have been one of their biggest issues. Indiana's defense hasn't taken the ball away, except for the end of this last game. I think that is something that needs to continue for Indiana to be successful against anybody, but especially on the road against Nebraska.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Turnover is going to be a big thing. I mean, Nebraska's been prone to handing the ball away. And like you said, we have the health factors. Michael Penix coming into this game. Is he going to play? Is he going to be healthy? It's a similar situation to Nebraska. Is Adrian Martinez going to be healthy enough to play? And I think with him, the question mark, anytime you're dealing with a knee injury and a leg injury like that, is he going to be able to scramble and run around? Because that's what makes him so deadly as a quarterback. He's had issues throwing the ball in a vacuum. He hasn't looked like a great passer at times this season, but he's such a good athlete that he can really get away with a lot of stuff that guys who, maybe aren't great athletes, they just can't get away with that. So even if he does play, okay, well, how mobile is he? That's going to be a big factor for Nebraska, I think, this week. And like I said, I think the big thing here for Indiana is even if it's Michael Penix, even if it's Peyton Ramsey, it doesn't matter. You should be able to run the football on this Nebraska front seven. It's an absolutely awful front seven. They've been awful all year long. I mean, just go back to their last game against Minnesota. Minnesota threw the ball 13 times in that game. I mean, they were not exactly being a pass-heavy offense, but what they did is they ran the ball right down their throats for 49 carries, 322 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Now, Minnesota's been a very good running team all season long. Let's give them credit for that. And Indiana has not been a great running team if you look at the year as a whole. But as we mentioned earlier, they've started to get that ground game going a little bit the last couple of weeks. The offensive line is playing much better, and Nebraska is the worst run defense in the Big Ten. So I think it doesn't really matter for Indiana who they have at quarterback now. It does matter, but I think the point is that Indiana should be able to run the ball in this team, and the running game should be a big factor in the game plan. And that should be the same even if Penix is at quarterback or even if Ramsey's at quarterback. You'd like to have Penix out there. I just think his arms opens up a whole lot of things for you offensively, especially even in the short passing game, with just how much zip he can get in those balls. It gives guys, a lot of time to make yards after the catch. But I do think there's some weaknesses in this Nebraska defense that can be exploited, especially in run defense. And it's a Nebraska team that's really backed into a corner, and that can make them dangerous, and that can be a little bit scary at times because you don't know how they're going to respond. But Indiana has a chance here to really make a huge statement win. I mean, you're talking 6 wins in October. That's pretty much unheard of for Indiana football if they can get this win. And I believe they're favored in this game right now. The spread's kind of hopped up and down. So, it remains to be seen if they can take advantage of it. But they have a huge opportunity to get probably the biggest win in Tom Allen's career since he's been here.
That wouldn't take much. So
Yeah, that's true.
when we look
That's
at
true.
this, I think the thing that stands out, like you said, Nebraska's run defense has allowed over 300 yards in 2 of its last 3 games. I think the Hoosiers be able to control the ball here. But the thing that really stands out to me, the key to this game is I think Nebraska has to be ready to be in more of a shootout than they're accustomed to. And I don't know that they could score more than a 27 points.
Yeah, well, especially I think the Indiana defense it's been frustrating because they've been very inconsistent at times. We've seen them play great when you look at the Eastern Illinois game, the UConn game, the Rutgers game. That's dominant defense, but we've seen them struggle against Michigan State, against Ohio State. And even if you go back to the Maryland game, like I said, it's a tale of two halves. The first half was not good defense. Second half was great defense. So we need to see that consistent Indiana defense that's going to show up and play for 4 quarters. But I can say that I have a whole lot more faith in Indiana's defense, their ability to really play well than I do in Nebraska. I think we've seen Indiana's defense play really, really well at times. I'm not sure if we can say the same for Nebraska, at least against any quality opponent or quality offense. So I think Indiana has the advantage defensively. I think Nebraska has a number of questions as far as the injury report, and that goes beyond Adrian Martinez. The team's starting running back is pretty much no longer with the team, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be back for Indiana or anytime soon after that. Wan'Dale Robinson, one of their big playmakers, is going to be questionable in this one. He's dealing with an injury. So there's a number of question marks on that Nebraska offense, and I think that Indiana defense, I want to be optimistic and believe that second half really showed them what they're capable of against Maryland. So if they can kind of just bottle that, bring that into Nebraska, I have a whole lot more faith in our defense's ability to get stops on Nebraska than I have faith in Nebraska's defense.
Yeah, the thing that does worry me is I do think Scott Frost is a really good football coach, and you're giving him an extra week to prepare. This is just a huge game. There's no other way to look at this. But, I mean, IU's got a fairly tough end of the season. I think it's safe to say they should make a bowl game. They only need one more win. I think they played Northwestern yet still, don't they? So they should be in good shape for that. When I look at the schedule, though, as you said, this all of a sudden becomes possibly 8 or 9 wins for the season if you win this game. If you win this, you're 6-2. You beat Northwestern, you're 7-2. You finish with Penn State, Michigan, and Purdue. You should get the Purdue game. Michigan and Penn State are both good teams. Michigan's at home. So this could be a special year for IU. And the bigger question is this. Does IU have a better chance of making the college football playoff in the next 5 years than Indiana basketball does?
I don't know if I get it. Maybe. It's kind of sad. I don't want to go into a whole argument about Indiana football versus Indiana basketball, but it's looking like Indiana's going to make the postseason this year. That'd be 2 times since I've been down there. We've yet to make it in basketball, so that says a lot about
they made it to
the
NIT
team.
last year.
That's true. The NIT, that's big. I forgot about that.
That counts about as much as IU playing Duke in the Pinstripe Bowl, though, probably.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. The 6 and 6 bowl games aren't much more exciting anyway. But I do think this, like you said, if you look at the schedule, it's Indiana football. You can't, there's really no reason to be greedy. I mean, this team winning 6 games would be a good season. At least you thought that at the beginning of the year.
Let's look at it like this, Cole. As an Indiana fan, it would not surprise me 5 or 6 weeks from now to be sitting here wondering what the hell happened and we were 5-7.
Yeah, it's Indiana football. They find ways to just screw it up seemingly every year. But I have to be honest. I sit here, I look at this schedule, I look at how the teams played when they're on, and I think almost at this point I would be disappointed with the 6 and 6 year, which is crazy to say.
Oh, yeah.
When you look at this schedule, 6 and 6 seems like an underachievement, which is crazy for a team.
I want at least 8 and 4.
Yeah, well, I think you look at the schedule. Look, you've got a huge game against Nebraska. We've talked about it a lot. It's probably the biggest game of Tom Allen's career. You could say the same thing about going in that Maryland game as well. That was another huge game. They took care of advantage. And now they've got a tough road game. And look, playing at Nebraska, that's going to be tough. I mean, that's going to be a sold-out stadium. It's going to be a big crowd, big environment. So, you're going to have to contend with that as well as the talent of Nebraska. But then you come home to Northwestern with how bad Northwesterners look. outside of Rutgers, it's probably the worst team in the Big Ten. Now at Penn State, okay, I want to be an optimist, but probably not that much of an optimist.
We're getting
Penn
our ass
State,
kicked in that game, probably. But then again, remember, Pitt only lost by a touchdown to them about a month ago.
That's true. That is true. And the other thing I look at is I think Michigan's very beatable. If you look on their schedule, I'm not impressed with Michigan. I don't think their offense is very explosive. I think the Indiana defense can have a lot of success there if they can stop the run, because Patterson at quarterback does not exactly scare me for Michigan. But I think it's the game that, Penix is going to have to be healthy for that one, because I'm not sure we'll be able to move the ball that well with a running attack against Michigan. And I think we'll need the arm strength of Penix to really be able to open things up there. But I think if you look, the big thing about Michigan, if you look when we play them, it's sandwiched in between the Michigan State game, a big rivalry game for Michigan, and the Ohio State game, probably the biggest rivalry in the country. So you kind of get them in a nice little sweet spot where you can sneak up on them. But and then obviously finishing the year with Purdue, there's potential for 3 to 4 wins there. And so at this point, sitting at 5-2, 6-6 is disappointing to me. If they finish 6-6, they'll make a bowl game, and that's great. Good for it's better than what we've done the last couple of years. But at this point, if they finish the season 6-6, I can't help but feel disappointed.
Yeah, it'll be a lot better in 1978. But I can tell you this also. The other reason in 1978 stands out to me is because there were a lot of people in Indiana that thought Indiana would beat Nebraska. Because Indiana, if I remember right, they started off that year playing like 3 top 15 teams. They went to LSU and only lost by a touchdown. They beat the Washington Huskies here. That was the Husky team that the year before, or that year actually, no, it was the year before they won the Rose Bowl. And IU beat Washington 14-7. And then Nebraska came in and beat us 69-17. And then after that, Washington, who wasn't that great that year, beat us 34-7, and everything just spiraled out of control after that. But I also remember that at the end of the year, we played like Ohio State and Purdue, who were both ranked in the top 20, and we lost by 3 in Bloomington against Ohio State, and then we lost to Purdue by like 10 points. So actually, Indiana, 4 of their 5 best performances were against top 20 teams. Everybody else that wasn't ranked blew us out. Well, not everybody, because we beat Illinois and Iowa, but they weren't any good that year. Northwestern, everybody beat Northwestern back then.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a tough team to figure out. But, that's Indiana football in a nutshell for you.
I just wanted to talk about the 1978 Indiana Hoosiers. I don't know why, but maybe we need to see if we get Lou Corso to come on and talk about them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's do it. I'm 100% down for that. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Nobody ever gets a hold of Lee wanting to talk about his time at IU. But, all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. We got to give a pick. What do you think? Indiana, Nebraska this weekend. Are you positive, Cole, or are you negative?
I guess I'll go positive. I would love to know who's going to start at quarterback in this game, because I think that would really help to clear a lot of things up, not just for Indiana, but Nebraska as well. But I think Nebraska has just – the big thing when I look at Nebraska, I'm not sure, maybe outside of one game this year, and they played a MAC opponent in Northern Illinois, they have yet to play a single game this year that impresses me at all. So, looking at that, I don't think they've played well in pretty much any game outside of one. I'll go Indiana. I think Indiana's playing a huge game. I think they're trending in the right direction, and I think they can expose the Nebraska run defense. I'll go Indiana wins 30-24.
All right. I'm going to go Indiana 31, Nebraska 27. I think Indiana's ability to run the ball. Stevie Scott's going to be the difference here. And if Stevie Scott can be the difference here, I don't think it matters which quarterback plays. They will both be – whichever one plays will be successful.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Stevie Scott and the offensive line are the key here. Guys, we will be back next Wednesday night, hopefully to talk about a win against Nebraska, because if it is, then it's starting to get serious on the Indiana Football Weekly Show, which we had our doubts if it ever would. But it seemed like it did, and you can tell because the shows have went from like 12 to 15 minutes to 25 to 30 minutes. So that makes it a lot better also. Maybe we'll even start getting some special guests on. Maybe there'll be special people that want to talk about Indiana football by the time this is done. But I know Indiana lost to Marquette 72-69 in a close, secret, hush-hush, mafia-run exhibition. So
yep.
Friday, you can hear the Indiana Basketball Weekly Show with myself, and you'll find out Friday. All right, guys, we're going to wrap the show up. We will be on with the Indiana football show next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Indiana Basketball Weekly will premiere Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so make sure you check us out there. You can actually call in. We've got a number and everything. We just got to start sending it out so people know what it is. Make sure you follow Cole at The Grueling Truth. Cole, at ColeHanna5 on Twitter, right?
Yep, correct.
All right. You can follow us at Grueling Truth. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for Cole Hanna, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.